Okay, life is good. We used the manual, followed the instructions, set the dial string up the way it was supposed to be, and repositioned the pointer on the dial string. So now when the tuning capacitor is all the way closed, it's down on this calibration mark here, just like it's supposed to be. You can't see that unless you look down here, but there's a little calibration mark. So we're right on the money there, and now the dial pointer works the way it's supposed to, no backlash. What somebody had done is put this drum on in the wrong position, and maybe move the dial drum in order to make the pointer be in the right place, rather than putting the dial drum in the right place and then fixing the pointer on. So we loosened up the pointer on the dial string, got everything right, and well, they say this was Heathkit's most difficult kit to build, and this may be one of the reasons. Now this silver gear down here is the split anti-backlash gear. It's two little gears that are parallel to each other with springs in between that take up any slack. And they're driven, they are driven by this brass gear on the dial string drum. And the point of this is to have this be able to move the tuning capacitor with no slop. Anytime the drum moves, the tuning capacitor moves. Well, I was having trouble with the dial string slipping on this is the shaft on the tuning knob, and that dial string was slipping on there, and I couldn't figure out why, and I finally took the dial string off after trying to adjust the tension 2 or 3 times and turned this by hand, and the thing was going clunk, 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 clunk. It was kind of jumping a step with every tooth of the gear. It wasn't smooth, and you could hear it, and it took too much torque to turn the thing, and the dial string was slipping on the shaft, wasn't able to supply enough torque. Well, I got out my handy dandy little hex driver and tried to adjust the nut on the brass gear to slide it in and out to make the teeth of the two gears mesh a little better and work more smoothly. But all that hex driver did was slip in this hex set screw. So somebody had tried it with the wrong one and mashed it up a little bit, or else it stuck, one or the other. But I was able to loosen up the lower gear, the set screw on it, and move it back and forth. So move it a little bit and tighten it and try it, move it a little bit and tighten it and try it, until I finally got a place where there was no backlash. Well, you can focus on this tuning plate and look at the gear at the same time if you're able to do that, and see that there's no backlash. The split gear is doing its job, but we've got it, it's probably this brass gear wore a little bit. We've got it oriented well enough so that it's smooth and there's no backlash. If you don't get it right, there will be backlash. You have to get it just right in order to let the split gears do their job and eliminate any backlash. The way it was before, these two gears were misaligned in some way, or had worn in some way, that it was going thunk, 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 you could feel it and you could hear it. And now, listen, can't hear anything. So what's obvious is that this gear here is on a shaft that goes all the way across here, and it's got a bearing surface on both ends. You have to have both ends of those free of gum and then lubricated, and you have to have the bearing here in the tuning capacitor clean, and down at the other end, I think there's not an actual bearing, but there's a sleeve there anyway. Anyway, I had to shoot those with deoxit to get any gum out. I think I had tried to put some lubricant on there, but I had to get rid of the old gum first. So this is absolutely critical. If there's too much friction in this from the gears being misadjusted, or the bearings being dry or gummed up from age or whatever, it just is simply the dial string will slip on this shaft down here. Now, I was shooting deoxit down here on these controls and stuff, and the deoxit does have some lubricant in it, and I might have gotten it on the dial string. So I tried to clean the dial string up good with rubbing alcohol and stuff, but I still wasn't getting anywhere. So I'm going to put it back together now, try to retension the dial string, and hope the cotton picker will work. You've got to have the correct number of turns around this, which seems to be 2 or 2.5 turns. I'm going to read the manual, but I tried to put another turn on there. It wouldn't work at all. It just jams up in there. So it's got to be led in exactly the right direction, the right number of turns. Everything has to be led correctly, or it will not work. So an interesting problem, and it must have been really interesting when this was newly constructed to get everything just right. All the angles of all the pulleys and the lead of the dial string right, and the tension right, and the position of the pointer right. Must have been a lot of fun. And here I'm going to redo part of it. I'm going to go read the manual on this now. I think I remember what I did, but I'm going to read the manual and put it back together the right way, just in case. Well, when in doubt, follow instructions. So the book says to adjust the tuning capacitor so it's completely open, and have this drum pointing this way. Here's the opening on the drum, and here's the corner of this little bracket up here, and they're just about in line. So instead of that, this thing was down here somewhere. So I loosened that up and turned it around where it was supposed to be, and that puts the pointer's supposed to be way down there, so the pointer's in the wrong part of the dial string. So this was done wrong in the beginning. And followed the instructions for running the dial string. Anchor this end first, full turnaround for this end here, and then the spring, the end of the spring is supposed to be down here somewhere. Quite a lot of tension on the dial string. Before, it was hardly extended at all. So now this thing is working the way it should work down here with no backlash. Comes down here, but watch what happens. We get down to this end. Of course, we've got to move the dial pointer again, because there are little calibration marks down here. You can see this little white triangle. That's a calibration mark, and at the other end there's another one, and those are the limits of the dial pointer travel. And what you do eventually is get the tuning capacitor fully open and fully closed with this indicator on those calibration marks. Well, I can only get so far here before the needle is going to hang up. So I can get here, and so far it's still working, but I think if I turn, before it wasn't working. I got down here and it wouldn't go. Now it's working okay. So I think what I got to do, in fact I know what I have to do, is free this pointer up from the dial string. Get over here so you can see it. Free the pointer up from the dial string. And I don't know whether this has actually been glued or not, but I've got to bend those tabs so that the pointer is free of the dial string. Run the capacitors to their limits and set the indicator on its calibration marks here, and then we should, after that, we can go through and calibrate the receiver. So that's what we did, and we got it working again. But now there it's crapped again. So I think this is a fault in the dial string itself. Got 3.5 turns on there, just like it says. And it'll go one way. It'll go down, but it won't go back up. It hits something. So there's some flaw in the covering. Oh, look at that, thing's crossed up. See, that's turning right. Now watch what happens. It gets to a certain point, it starts turning over on itself. So that's not right. That's what's hanging it up. And that may be, there's this little wire here. And that's a guide for that. Now let's see. Now it's going to work. So this little piece of wire, this adjustable piece of wire right here, has to guide that dial string on this shaft so that it won't roll up over on itself down here at the extreme limits of travel. That's as far as it should go. And now it's going to work. Ha ha ha. Well, isn't that cute? Isn't that cute? Well, they knew they had a problem, and that's how they fixed it. Okay, live and learn, as they say. Okay, life is good. We used the manual, followed the instructions, set the dial string up the way it was supposed to be, and repositioned the pointer on the dial string. So now when the tuning capacitor is all the way closed, it's down on this calibration mark here, just like it's supposed to be. You can't see that unless you look down here, but there's a little calibration mark. So we're right on the money there, and now the dial pointer works the way it's supposed to, no backlash, and we'll fire the radio up now and warm it up and see how bad the calibration is. What somebody had done is put this drum on in the wrong position, and maybe move the dial drum in order to make the pointer be in the right place, rather than putting the dial drum in the right place and then fixing the pointer on. So we loosened up the pointer on the dial string, got everything right, and the right number of turns around the shaft here. And the critical last thing is this little, I don't know, I showed it to you in the last video. This little adjustable arm here, this little piece of wire, has to push that dial string down and lead it just at the right angle on this shaft. Otherwise, it gets to a certain point and the dial string starts rolling over the top of itself, and that just locks everything up. And that was what was happening that we didn't recognize until the last moment. But it's a good thing because now we've got this thing the way it should be. So now I'm going to I'll put the plug on it. We'll warm it up, and we'll tune in the beacon down at 50.68 or 69, and see where it comes up on the dial, and do whatever we have to do to make that right. But big success. I was freaked out. I thought I was going to have to replace this dial string. It's getting worn, and it should be replaced someday. But now we know how to string it. But, I used to overhaul antique radios, and most of them had dial strings. And I'm here to tell you that trying to reinvent the wheel on stringing a dial string, especially if it's complex, is a real losing deal. You've got to get the manual and do it the way it was designed, or a turns ratio won't be right, or it'll hang up, or something else. This receiver over here that I trash picked years ago, AM/FM receiver, was thrown on a junk pile because the dial string was broken. Well, I cleaned it up and made it work, and didn't have any manual, so I just strung the dial any way I could, and it was wrong. So the needle will go over about 3/4 of the way, and then it'll stop, just because I didn't have a manual. Pre-internet days, didn't know how to do it. And it's been that way for 25 years. So I've taken it off to replaced it with another receiver. I'm going to clean all the pots and switches on it, and get the info and string the dial right so that it works. But that's just the way it is. I don't think it matters how smart you are or how many times you've done it. You really just need the right information. Whoever did this was smart, and they sort of made it work, but it wasn't right. Well, here we have the Shawnee with the receiver calibrated. So we're listening to a beacon about 50.7, and there it is. I'll show you how the spotting works on this thing. Let's run it up to 50.4. We'll turn on the spotting. What's going on here? So the receiver's calibrated pretty much right on the money at 50.4. So there's the VFO, and you can spot with one of the crystals. There's a crystal about 50.15. So there we go. Squelch is working. So it didn't take very much to calibrate the receiver once we got the dial pointer in the right place. Put a tuning tool in L7 and adjust the low end, and go up to the high end, and C23 or whatever is a little trimmer right next to it, and juggle those two back and forth. I used the signal generator in my digital receiver to get it pretty good. Wanted to be able to dial up 50.4 and be right there, and have 50.125 come up where it should be, and the beacon comes up where it should be, and that's about all I care about. But there we go. We'll go through the rest of the receiver. I really haven't done anything like test the tubes. There's a few capacitors to replace, have not gone through the receiver alignment procedure to make sure the RF and IF stages are peaked up the way they should be, nor that the VFO oscillator, crystal oscillator, multiplier, and driver are all tracking the VFO as they should, but we'll get to that eventually.